I wasn't supposed to be home until Thursday. But as the flight descended a day early, slicing through thick clouds into a city that hadn't missed me, I didn't feel the thrill of surprise. Just fatigue. The kind that clings behind your eyes no matter how many hours you sleep on a plane. Still, I smiled at the thought of seeing my boys Logan and Ezra, maybe catching them in some hilarious dance-off or fighting over cereal choices. I'd texted Brent that morning, a casual, early meetings wrapped, heading back tonight. No reply. Typical. The Uber ride was quiet. I watched the streets roll by, each familiar turn of the neighborhood soothing and sharp all at once. Home, but not quite. Something gnawed at my chest. A hum of dread I couldn't name yet. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Paranoid. Overworked. Still, I took a breath before unlocking the front door. And stepped into silence. Not the kind of silence that follows a nap or a lazy Sunday, but a thick, weighted quiet. The kind that swells in the space where something sacred has been punctured. My suitcase thudded gently against the hardwood as I turned the corner into the living room and stopped. They were all there. Brent, on the far end of the couch, legs wide like he owned the air in the room. My mother, Della, perched beside him, her posture tight and disapproving, as if she'd known I'd ruin the ambience just by walking in. Logan and Ezra sat in the middle, unusually still for boys their age. And then Sarah, my best friend. My sister in all but blood. She sat like a queen in a borrowed castle, her arm casually slung across the back of the couch, one bare foot tucked under her. Like she lived here. Like this was hers. No one spoke. I glanced at my sons. Ezra looked down at his hands. Logan met my gaze, and I saw it there, resolve. A boy trying on manhood too soon. Sit down, Mom, Logan said. His voice wasn't cruel, but it held something far more cutting. Certainty. I didn't move. You need to accept a new reality, he continued, voice low but rehearsed. Auntie Sarah is more like a mother to us now. Sarah, my friend, my shadow in every room I'd trusted her to walk beside me in. My echo when I needed backup, laughter, grounding. She smiled faintly, not smug, just settled. As though this declaration had been expected. Practiced. Like it had already happened, and I was simply being informed, the way someone might tell you they'd repainted a room you didn't know you'd vacated. My mother nodded slowly, as if Logan had said something wise. I should have expected that. Della had always been critical, quietly resentful of my independence. She loved control more than she ever loved clarity. And Brent? He didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Just stared. Like I was a math problem he'd stopped trying to solve long ago. I looked down at the suitcase still in my hand. My shoes, dusty from the travel. The crease in my blazer. I thought about the meeting I'd crushed that morning, the investors I'd convinced, the empire I'd continued to build brick by brick. For them. For us. But I said nothing. Words would have fractured the moment, and they didn't deserve that. They didn't deserve the sound of my heartbreak or the tremble in my voice. I wasn't going to give them the spectacle they clearly thought they were owed. Instead, I set my bag gently on the floor, the sound far too small in the room that had once been mine. I glanced around, at the photos still hung on the wall, of birthdays and graduations and vacations I paid for. The candles I'd bought. The rug I'd chosen on a trip to Morocco. Every inch of this home bore my fingerprints. And yet I was being evicted in real time from a life I'd built. I inhaled slowly, steadying the quake in my ribs. My eyes moved from Ezra to Logan. They didn't look away. I wondered how long they'd been coached for this moment. How many nights Sarah had lingered just long enough to slip into their routines. How many breakfasts she'd made them while I was working across time zones. I'd always trusted her to fill in the gaps, to love them like I did. I never expected her to rewrite the script and cast herself as lead. I caught Sarah's eye just for a moment. There was no guilt there. Only possession. She had decided this life was hers now, and the others had agreed. That's when I knew. This wasn't a betrayal. It was a coup. But I didn't argue. Didn't cry. Didn't demand explanations or make grand pronouncements. They thought they had orchestrated some grand reveal. That I'd crumble under the weight of their collective rejection. But they had forgotten something crucial. They hadn't built me. They didn't own me. I stepped back, fingers brushing my suitcase handle again. I lifted it in one smooth motion, walked to the door without a word, and let it shut behind me with the same quiet dignity they'd mistaken for weakness. I didn't just walk out of the room. I walked out of the version of myself they thought they could contain. And somewhere, deep beneath the ache blooming in my chest, something cold and clear settled in. If this was the new reality, then they hadn't met the new Mira yet. But they would. The silence of my home office was the only kind I trusted anymore. Not the forced hush of betrayal hidden in plain sight, like what I'd walked into the day before, but a real silence, the kind that hummed with potential. The kind where thinking felt like breathing. Where planning could be its own quiet kind of power. I sat down in the leather chair Brent never liked. He said it was too stiff, too formal, but that was exactly why I kept it. This room had always been mine, tucked away behind the dining area they rarely entered, dismissed as Mom's workspace. I booted up my laptop, the one no one thought to check because they believed I kept my real work at the firm. That was their first mistake. The desktop loaded with familiar efficiency. No pictures. No distractions. Just files, folders, numbers. I clicked open the main folder, Calloway_life. Inside, every blueprint I'd drawn to protect myself ticked quietly in place like a vault ready to open. They thought they'd shocked me. That I'd crumble. They thought emotional devastation would come before strategy. But I didn't feel broken, I felt focused. I pulled up the trust. The Calloway family trust. It sat like a crown jewel in the center of the screen, all assets neatly outlined. My name, Mira Calloway, sat proudly on every line that mattered. I remembered the day it was drawn up, the lawyer's office so sterile it almost made me nauseous. Brent had yawned through the meeting, barely paying attention as he signed each page. I'd insisted on protections contingencies. He joked that I didn't trust him. I didn't laugh. I clicked on another file, Calloway Enterprises back-end ownership. A tidy 27% stake was mine, hidden in layers of LLCs and silent partnerships. Brent had the charm, the swagger, the face of the business. But I was the infrastructure. I was the one who handled the expansion permits, the vendor contracts, the legal compliance reviews. He thought his name on the sign meant he owned it all. He never even realized I held the screws in place. And now I would unscrew them quietly. A ping sounded from my encrypted email. I opened the alert from my cloud storage system. A backup of every family finance report had uploaded. I clicked through the accounts. The savings, mostly untouched, the boys' college funds, still padded, and then the household fund, which Sarah had been accessing without subtlety. There were charges from boutiques she'd never shopped at before, spas outside her usual radius, restaurants she once mocked for being too pretentious. She was settling into my life one manicure at a time. I made a note to flag the cards. They wanted to paint me as the cold one. The one who distanced herself. But while they played dress-up in my house, I was here, ensuring their fantasy had a clock ticking beneath it. I opened the postnuptial agreement next. A PDF with Brent's digital signature, dated 4 years ago. Right after I found out about his affair with the assistant who lasted 3 months. That was the first time I realized I couldn't afford to be naive. Love didn't protect assets. And loyalty was always negotiable for men like him. The agreement was airtight. Ironclad. Crafted by my personal attorney, Eliza Mercado, who didn't just practice law, but specialized in high-net-worth female exit strategies, as she put it. I'd consulted her quietly, methodically, under the guise of estate planning. She'd built me an escape route with turn-by-turn directions. Just in case. It was always just in case. Now, I was no longer preparing for someday. Now was here. I dialed Eliza's direct line. She picked up after 2 rings. "Mira," she said, her voice calm and clipped. "I take it this isn't a courtesy call." "It's time," I said. There was a pause, a quiet respect on the other end. Then we began. We walked through initial moves. Dissolving co-owned accounts. Freezing access to secondary funds. Filing a formal review of Brent's business assets, which would trigger an automatic compliance check. He wouldn't even know it was me at first. Eliza would handle it all under the radar. I wouldn't make a scene. I'd simply begin the unraveling. After the call, I opened a shared folder from my tech consultant, Milo. Years ago, I'd hired him to set up family firewalls and filters. I told him it was to protect the boys from internet risks. That was half true. The rest? I wanted layers. Shadows. A backdoor into every device Brent used. I sent him a message. Initiate Protocol Juno. Immediate extraction. Full digital sweep. Confirm confirmation chain. A reply came seconds later. Understood. Extraction begins now. ETA, 36 hours for full mirror of all data points. Sarah had been logging into my accounts to transfer funds for house expenses. She used the family card for her gym membership now. For catered meals. For gas in the luxury SUV that I bought. That account was being rerouted today. Every charge now flagged. Every dollar traceable. Brent's mistake was always underestimating how well I understood systems. He thought I was the heart of the home, warm, replaceable, emotional. He forgot I was the spine. I held the structure up. I was the reason anything stood at all. I pulled up the last file of the night, Operation Deadless. My own private roadmap. Every password. Every asset. Every piece of evidence filed away in folders named after classical myths, because sometimes I liked the poetry of revenge. It reminded me that I wasn't just reacting, I was rewriting the story. Outside, I could hear faint laughter from the kitchen. Sarah's laugh. A delicate trill, like the world had finally landed at her feet. I imagined her pouring wine into my glasses, standing at my stove, planning her future in my house. Maybe she thought she'd get to redecorate. Maybe she'd already picked out new curtains for my bedroom. I smiled without warmth. Let her laugh. Let them all believe they'd replaced me. That they'd buried me under their betrayal. Because what they didn't know is this. I was already drawing the blueprints for their collapse. And when the breakpoints hit, and there'd be nothing left standing but me. I moved through the house like I wasn't there. It was strange, this new role I'd taken on, part ghost, part sentinel. My footsteps were lighter now, deliberate. My presence muted. I'd learned how to occupy space without drawing breath. It wasn't fear. It was strategy. To be seen was to be underestimated, ridiculed, challenged. But to be invisible? That gave me power. They thought I'd left. That walking out that day meant surrender. But I'd only stepped out of the cage they built for me, not out of the house I still legally owned. Now I watched them like I was behind glass. They didn't notice the shift. Sarah laughed too loudly. Brent played domestic partner like it was a costume he'd been dying to wear. And Della, my own mother, acted like she'd won something. Like my absence confirmed every bitter little whisper she'd ever spread about me. But I was here. I'd returned through the side entrance, the one off the laundry room that no one remembered had a broken motion sensor. It was just one of many details they'd overlooked. The cameras were the second. Small, sleek, nearly invisible, installed behind vents, light fixtures, even nestled in the soil of the faux plant near the fireplace. I'd had them ready for years, hidden away for a moment just like this. And now they were active. I watched from the office first, then later from my laptop in a nearby rental unit I'd secured under an LLC name. I watched as Sarah moved freely through my home, brushing her fingers along countertops she hadn't scrubbed clean a day in her life. She wore my robe, used my skincare, told Ezra to brush his teeth twice. She laughed with Brent in the kitchen, her laugh a little too performative, too chirpy, as if she were still trying to convince even herself she belonged. But the worst was hearing my mother. Della sat with Sarah in the mornings, their coffee ritual somehow more sacred than any moment she'd ever had with me. I'd recorded them through the vent above the breakfast nook. Their voices were muffled but clear enough. "She's always been cold," Della said one morning, her tone almost tender in its betrayal. "Never knew how to be soft. That's why the boys pulled away." Sarah nodded with a faux humility that made bile rise in my throat. "I don't want to replace her," she said, voice syrupy. "But the boys need warmth. Routine. I'm just trying to help." They spoke about me like I was a ghost they'd finally exorcised. I played the clip back 3 times. Not because I needed confirmation, but but because the way Della said cold hung inside me like a hook. My mother had never liked how I moved through the world with spine instead of softness. She'd mistaken my clarity for cruelty. She could never accept that her daughter had become the woman she was too afraid to be. And now she'd aligned herself with Sarah, folding into the glow of someone younger, warmer, more agreeable. She didn't care that Sarah had clawed her way into my marriage. She just cared that someone played the part better than I ever would. I didn't react, not yet. I watched more footage over the following days. Brent and Sarah whispered often, huddled in corners like teenagers. But I learned quickly that they spoke in code. "How's the stock on Tuesday?" Brent asked once, clearly not referring to stocks. "Falling fast," Sarah had replied, brushing his arm. They both laughed. I cross-referenced the date and time with my footage logs. That was the morning Ezra told Sarah about his math grade before mentioning it to me. A stock drop, I realized, was any moment when I was excluded, demoted, or failed to be acknowledged. Every instance cataloged like some sick currency of relevance. Another night, Brent said, "We'll need to swap the centerpiece." "Already done," Sarah said. "It looks better now." The camera in the dining room showed her replacing a family photo from my college graduation with one of her and the boys at a museum. I hadn't even known they'd gone. The frame had been mine, gifted by Logan when he was 10. Every interaction revealed a deeper erosion. I was being written out of my own narrative. They weren't just playing house, they were rewriting history. And the boys? Logan and Ezra laughed more with her now. Not out of joy, but performance. I could see it. Their movements had a hesitation to them, a way of checking the room before speaking. That sort of scanning only happened when a child knew love came with conditions. Still, I didn't act. I archived everything. Every smile Brent gave her when he thought no one was watching. Every time she touched his arm and he didn't pull away. Every time my mother sighed like this life, my life, had always belonged to someone else. I saved them all. Dated them. Labeled the files meticulously, betrayal_living_room_0322, Saratouch_kitchen_0324, DellaGossip_breakfast_0320. This wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. One night, Sarah stood in the guest room, my old reading room, and held up swatches of paint. "I think something softer," she said aloud, to no one in particular. "This room needs to feel like it belongs to me now." She said it like I was already gone. I watched her say it 5 times in a loop. She wore my slippers. She hadn't even noticed one of the cameras embedded in the vent behind her. She couldn't imagine I was watching. They thought I was gone. But I was still here. Not the woman they thought they could dismiss. Not the version of Mira Calloway who begged, cried, or crumbled. The new me moved through walls. Through code. Through cameras and silence. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't confronting. I was recording. And when the moment came, and it would come, I'd give them exactly what they gave me. But sharper. Undeniable. Permanent. I woke before dawn. Not because I couldn't sleep, though the weight of what I knew now pressed hard against my chest, but because I had work to do. Real work. Not spreadsheets and budgets and forecasts, but the kind of labor no one thanks you for until it saves your life. The kind of labor that makes someone like me dangerous. The house was quiet. Brent and Sarah had started sleeping in on weekends, as if sharing a bed earned them rest. I moved through the hallway like a current of air, slipping into my office without turning on a single light. I didn't need to. I knew where everything was. This room had always been my sanctuary, my command center. And now it would be my battlefield. I opened my laptop and unlocked the encrypted folder I'd named Solstice years ago. Just in case. Eliza Mercado's voice echoed in my memory, smooth and firm. "Mira, contingency is not betrayal. It's preservation." She was right. Brent's first indiscretion hadn't shattered me, but it had clarified things. Love was beautiful, but boundaries were sacred. And now, those boundaries were not just broken, they'd been burned to ash by the very people who should have honored them. I clicked through a sequence of spreadsheets first. Direct deposits. Automatic payments. I'd set up most of them years ago, and Brent never paid attention to the details. That was always his flaw. He thought the show was everything. The back end bored him. But I lived in the back end. I owned it. Quite literally. I opened our shared business accounts and began rerouting deposits. I didn't touch the balances yet. I didn't need to. It was enough to redirect the income to an account solely in my name. Let the next payday come. Let Brent wonder where the money went. He wouldn't realize the flow had changed until it dried up beneath his feet. Next, I pulled the folder labeled Assets, Dissolution Prep. I'd made it after the last time he came home with perfume on his collar and lies on his tongue. It contained the paperwork to begin untangling our shared investments, stocks, real estate, even the mountain property we'd pretended we'd someday retire to. It was all drafted. All that remained was sending it in. I hit forward on the email to Eliza. The subject line was simple: initiate. Then I opened a new browser tab and logged into the software used to manage Brent's construction business, software I paid for, configured, and maintained. His employees didn't know I could see their hours, their invoices, their internal communications. Brent didn't know that every contract passed through my approval before it was finalized. His company didn't run without me. It never had. I downloaded every file, exported backups. I flagged discrepancies, missing payments, unreported expenses. It would take his accountant weeks to realize what I already knew. Brent had been sloppy. Sarah had encouraged it. And I was about to make every error very, very visible. As I waited for the files to download, I messaged Milo, my tech consultant. Begin Phase 2. Need full data sweep. Devices, email, cloud. Priority level red. His reply came seconds later. Understood. Full shadow trace in progress. Will update every 6 hours. Then, the satisfying ping of my financial monitoring alert came through. Sarah had just charged $328 at a boutique in the Arts District, again on my card. I smiled. Perfect. I had left the cards open on purpose. I needed more evidence. Her usage wasn't theft. Not technically, not yet. But it would be. I'd warned her once, years ago, about borrowing my things without asking. She hadn't changed. She'd just gotten bolder. Every transaction now funneled directly into a traceable report, mirrored to my cloud. Shoes. Skincare. Brunch with Brent. All of it marked, categorized, logged. She was digging her own grave, and I wasn't about to stop her. Let her think the silence meant surrender. I shifted to my next task. I walked into the main hallway and pulled open the console drawer beneath the stairs where Brent kept his emergency stash, an old laptop used during our early days. It had dust on it now, but I booted it anyway. He'd logged into our financial system from here once. That meant his credentials were cached. I just needed a footprint. The machine hummed to life. Outdated, slow, but it still held everything I needed. I opened the browser and smiled. There it was. Autofill saved his login. I clicked in. Access granted. And there it was, all of it. Passwords. Old email threads. A folder full of receipts for dates he'd claimed were working late. Dinners at restaurants I'd never been to. Jewelry I never received. I transferred it all to an encrypted drive. He never imagined I'd be the one auditing him. That I would be the shadow watching over the empire he thought he built alone. I returned to my office, plugged in the drive, and began sorting. I added new folders for each category: infidelity, Phase 1, misappropriation of funds, unauthorized access, and co-conspiracy, Sarah Callahan. Every digital breadcrumb they'd left behind, I picked up. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. This was about precision. About reclaiming the narrative they tried to steal from me. Later that morning, I texted Eliza again, also prepare action on unauthorized usage of shared credit lines. Include Sarah Callahan. She responded within minutes, already ahead of you. Working on fraud angle. Co-conspirator language is usable. Let's keep collecting. I sat back in my chair. My fingers were trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer current of what I was building. A quiet, deliberate storm. Every move I made now was one step closer to the truth being undeniable. I didn't need them to admit what they'd done. I just needed the paper trail. And soon, the paper would speak louder than any of them ever could. Outside the office window, I saw Brent walking toward the front door with a grocery bag, casual, whistling. I watched him laugh when Sarah opened the door for him. She kissed his cheek like it belonged to her. Let them play their parts. Let them bask in the illusion. Because behind every smile, every login, every credit swipe, I now had them. They forgot I wasn't the decoration. I was the architect. And I was already rewriting the blueprints of their downfall. They thought I'd break. That was the quiet hope behind their smirks, their sideways glances, the snide comments masked as observations. It hung in the air like perfume, faint, sweet, and toxic. They thought they could starve me of affection, strip me of respect, and that I would finally fold. That I would become so small I'd simply vanish into the walls they'd painted over. But I'd studied erosion. I knew how quietly it worked. And I also knew it could be reversed. So I played along. In the morning, I smiled as I poured their coffee. I placed the mugs just how Brent liked, handle facing left. I packed Logan's soccer bag and made sure Ezra had extra pencils for class. I sat at the kitchen island, listening as Sarah recounted a story about how Brent kissed her back in college, like it was some secret worth celebrating instead of an embarrassment she wore like a medal. I always knew, she said with a chuckle, her voice curling with triumph. Even back then, it should have been us. Brent grinned like an idiot. He didn't correct her. Just took another sip of coffee and nodded like he agreed. I laughed too. Not because it was funny, but because I needed them to keep underestimating me. Ezra walked in, sweaty from morning practice, and breezed past me like I wasn't there. "Auntie Sarah," he said, holding out his phone. "Did you see my new stats from last night?" Sarah took the phone with a warm coo and wrapped an arm around his shoulders, scrolling through with exaggerated praise. I waited for him to look at me, to meet my eyes. He didn't. It stung, of course it did. But pain is not the same as weakness. Pain wakes you up. It reminds you that you're still alive, and I was very much alive. Brent made another dig later that day. We were in the living room, him watching a game, me pretending to flip through a design magazine. He said it like a casual remark tossed over his shoulder. "You've been so tired lately. You don't laugh anymore. It's like living with a shadow." I didn't flinch. I turned the page. "Well," I said, calm and even, "maybe the shadow's been holding up the whole house." He didn't get it. He rarely did. Later, I stood in the hallway as Logan and Sarah talked in hushed tones. I wasn't supposed to be there. I'd paused to adjust a photo frame, a candid shot of us at the lake, one of the few times Brent actually smiled like he meant it. "She just doesn't get us," Logan said, voice low. "You actually listen." "I'm here for you, sweetheart," Sarah said. "I'll always be." My chest tightened. But again, I said nothing. I carried the pain in one hand and the plan in the other. That night, I cooked dinner. Roasted vegetables, garlic chicken, wild rice. I poured them wine, Sarah's favorite Pinot, the one I'd stopped drinking years ago because it gave me headaches. I watched as Brent leaned into her, fingers grazing her wrist, too familiar, too sure of himself. Sarah laughed again, that breathy little giggle that used to signal late-night ice cream runs and shared secrets. Now it grated. They thought they were devouring me slowly, starving me of recognition. But I was feeding off it. I needed them to feel safe. Needed them to feel bold. Because the timer had already started. In 72 hours, everything would collapse. All the bank reroutes had gone through. The credit cards now looped to new tracking accounts. Brent's business filings had triggered the review Eliza set in motion. He didn't know it yet, but 3 of his licenses were about to be suspended. Sarah's spending sprees had been neatly packaged into a fraud report we were filing with the trust administrator. The evidence folders on my encrypted drive had been reviewed, cross-checked, and logged with timestamps. Even the boys' tuition payments, medical benefits, and custodial rights had been prepped for legal realignment. I wasn't taking them away, I was protecting them. And someday, when they saw it clearly, I wanted to be the one they remembered as unshakable. After dinner, Sarah reached for the dessert tray I'd set out, almond tart and chocolate bark, and said, "It's so generous of you, Mira, really. Most women wouldn't be so gracious." Gracious. Like I'd stepped aside. Like I'd handed her my life and said, "Please, take it. You deserve this more than I do." I smiled again. "Oh, it's nothing. You've already taken so much more." She blinked, trying to decipher whether I was joking. I let her sit in that discomfort for a moment. Then I collected the plates and walked away. They laughed behind me. They always did. I went back into my office and locked the door. I turned on my laptop and opened the countdown Eliza and I had programmed. A digital clock. Bright red numbers. Ticking down. 72 hours became 48. And in 48, everything would tilt. The utilities, the titles, the tax filings, all routed. The sheriff's office had been notified of the legal motions already in draft. Brent would be served. Sarah would be named. Della, well, she was in for her own reckoning. She wasn't a bystander. She'd enabled this. Stoked the fire. Fanned the flames when she should have put them out. They all thought I was collapsing. But I'd only bent low enough to plant the charges. I stood in the hallway later that night, listening to them laugh in the den. Brent's laugh rang hollow. Sarah's rang high. And the boys, God, I hated how comfortable they looked. Not because I wanted them to suffer, but because they didn't know. They didn't understand, yet that comfort built on deceit always crumbles. Let them enjoy it. Because in 48 hours, the lights would flicker. The keys wouldn't work. The accounts would fail. And the woman they thought was too tired to fight would show them she'd never needed to fight. She'd just needed the right moment to let go of the rope and watch them fall. The morning was crisp, unusually so for late spring, and the sky hung heavy with gray. A silence lingered just beneath the surface of every sound, the whistle of the kettle, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the floorboards as I moved about the house. It was the kind of quiet that signaled a turning. Not a storm. A shift. An ending. Ezra grumbled about missing his hoodie while Logan shoved toast into his mouth and texted under the table. Their voices overlapped as they talked over each other about school, friends, practice. They hardly looked at me. Not with malice. Just with a kind of practiced indifference that stung more than open cruelty. And Sarah? She was still upstairs in my robe, pretending she hadn't completely hijacked my life. Brent had left early, said he had a site inspection, but I'd already seen the calendar invites. A hotel. A midday reservation. I handed Ezra his lunchbox, ran my fingers through Logan's hair. He didn't pull away. Not exactly. Just shifted slightly like the contact annoyed him. My boys. I kissed them both on the cheeks and told them to have a good day at school, same as always. They mumbled their goodbyes and stepped into the carpool van without looking back. I stood on the porch for a moment longer than usual, watching the van disappear down the street. Then I moved. I stepped back inside and took a long breath, one that expanded all the way down to my ribs. There was no tremble in my hands this time. No fluttering beneath my skin. Just calm. Finality. I walked to the hallway closet and pulled out the thick file folder labeled Execution. The name felt melodramatic when I'd written it months ago. Now it felt prophetic. I made the first call to Eliza. "Initiate phase 3, I said simply. "Already in motion," she replied. "You'll receive the final confirmations within the hour." We hung up without pleasantries. Next, I moved to the front door. I clicked the button on my phone's security app. A soft click echoed through the space as the smart lock system rebooted. Codes changed. Keys were disabled. All remote entries were reset. Sarah and Brent wouldn't be able to enter without my authorization. The locks had been mine all along. I walked to the kitchen. Sarah's gym bag was by the table. She'd be furious when she realized her key fob no longer worked. I imagined her tapping it repeatedly against the door, assuming it was a glitch. Calling Brent, who'd checked the app and realized he'd been locked out of his own illusions. I smiled. Then I moved on to the accounts. My fingers danced across the keyboard with quiet precision. The shared checking account? Emptied. Not stolen, just legally transferred to the trust account I had sole control over. The utilities were shut off next. Brent would assume it was a mistake, that someone forgot to pay. He'd try to log in. The password wouldn't work. The SUV? That was my next favorite step. Sarah had taken to driving it like it was a trophy. She parked it crookedly in the driveway, left her gym shoes in the back seat, stuffed receipts in the console like it was hers. But the loan was in my name. The repossession order had already been processed. I checked my phone. The tow company had confirmed arrival in 25 minutes. Poetic. I moved room to room, gathering the few items I still considered mine. The jewelry box from my grandmother. The cufflinks I gave Brent on our 10th anniversary, not for sentimental reasons, but because I paid for them and he'd pawn them if given the chance. I gathered the boys' baby albums from the top shelf in my closet, tucked them under my arm, and loaded everything into my trunk. No one called. No one checked where I was. I didn't expect them to. By noon, the electricity was down. The Wi-Fi blinked out. I stood on the front porch as the tow truck rolled in, large and unhurried, and watched as the driver hitched the SUV and drove off without fanfare. I imagined Sarah's voice the next time she returned. The outrage. The disbelief. She'd accuse me of being cruel. Of being vindictive. She'd never understand this wasn't revenge. This was extraction. This was erasure. I left the house soon after that. Didn't slam the door. Didn't write a note. I simply walked out and didn't look back. I drove to the condo I'd leased under the business name Brent never thought to question. It was clean, bright, minimal. Nothing in it reminded me of the life I had just vacated. And that was the point. I turned off my phone for an hour. When I turned it back on, the messages poured in like a flood breaking through a dam. Missed calls. Voicemails. Texts. Notifications. Brent. Why isn't the card working? Sarah. Where's my car? Is this a joke? My mother. Mira. What on earth have you done? There was no panic in me. Only quiet satisfaction. Let them unravel. Let them shout into the silence I left behind. I brewed tea and sat by the window. Across the city, my former home would be dimming, powerless, locked. The illusion was cracking. I knew the boys would call eventually. Not right away. Not that day. But once the dust settled, when the adults started pointing fingers, when the Wi-Fi didn't come back on and the fridge stopped humming and their routines cracked open, they'd realize something had shifted. Not just around them, but beneath them. The foundation they'd taken for granted was gone. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't fought. I hadn't even raised my voice. I had erased myself. And in doing so, I had taken everything they believed they owned with me. The phone was silent when I opened my eyes. For once, no alarm, no chime, no pre-sunrise calendar alert pulling me out of sleep. Just light, soft and unfiltered, streaming through the curtains of the condo bedroom. I let myself lie there for a few seconds, letting my limbs stretch into the stillness, my breath slow and deliberate. It was the first morning in years I hadn't been needed. Not as a wife. Not as a mother. Not as the fixer, the scheduler, the emotional sponge for everyone else's storms. Just Mira. I reached for my phone eventually, more out of habit than urgency. I didn't expect to see what I saw. 115 missed calls. The number made me blink, sit up straighter. I stared at the screen, watching it refresh as new voicemails dropped in. My call log was an archive of chaos. Brent, Sarah, Della, Logan, Ezra, names stacked like a landslide. I didn't listen right away. Instead, I padded to the kitchen, made coffee slowly, methodically. The bitter scent grounded me, the clink of the spoon against the mug reminding me that I still controlled this new space, this new rhythm. I wasn't rushing to pack lunches or settle arguments over which hoodie belonged to whom. I wasn't racing to keep everything stitched together while they pulled at the seams behind my back. By the time I returned to the couch with my coffee, there were 118 missed calls. I finally opened the voicemail app. First voicemail, 6:01 a.m., Brent. Mira, what the hell is going on? The house, there's no power. The door code doesn't work. I thought maybe it was a glitch, but just call me back, okay? Next, 6:17 a.m., Della. Mira, this isn't funny. The boys are confused, and Sarah said the cards aren't working. Where are you? Don't drag this out. 6:31 a.m., Brent again. You emptied the business accounts? Are you serious? You can't just call me. We can fix this. 6:45 a.m., Sarah. I swear to God, Mira, if this is your idea of revenge, my car is gone. You had it towed? What the hell is wrong with you? I thought we were. You're insane. I sipped my coffee, letting the heat chase away the edge of their panic. Sarah's voice cracked on the word insane. The irony almost made me laugh. The woman who had inserted herself into every part of my life now couldn't even find her way out of the driveway. More voicemails, 7:10 a.m., Logan. Mom? Are you okay? Ezra's freaking out. Grandma's yelling. Can you please just text me? I don't know what's going on. That one pulled at me. My boy. His voice still carried that mix of teenage bravado and uncertainty. I closed my eyes, took another breath. I didn't want to hurt them. I never wanted that. But I couldn't protect them by staying inside the machine that was tearing me apart. 7:12 a.m., Ezra. Mom? Where are you? Dad's really mad and Auntie Sarah is screaming and we didn't have breakfast. I miss you. Can you come home? That one cracked me. It didn't undo me, not fully, but it cracked something tender. I paused the playback and stared at the wall for a long moment. I imagined them in the kitchen, opening the fridge to find it dark and humming with emptiness. No milk. No Wi-Fi. No mom to fix it all. But I couldn't go back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I resumed the messages. 8:05 a.m., Sarah again. I just got off the phone with the bank. Everything's in your name. You can't do this. This isn't just about you. It's about the kids. Brent's business is tanking, and you're sitting there pretending this is justice. No, Sarah. This isn't pretending. This is justice. 8:24 a.m., Brent. You're blowing everything up. You win, okay? You win. Is that what you want to hear? Just come back. The boys need you. A different tone now. Not rage. Not confusion. Desperation. It suited him. 9:15 a.m., Della. I don't know what you think you're doing, Mira, but this is cruel. You're not proving a point. You're just being vindictive. After everything I did for you. I stopped it there. Everything she did for me? The memory of her nodding in agreement with Logan's declaration, Auntie Sarah is more like a mother now, played like a broken reel in my mind. She'd chosen Sarah. Chosen convenience and control over loyalty. I scrolled to the most recent voicemail. 10 minutes ago. Logan. Mom. I think I get it now. Or, I'm starting to. Dad's freaking out. Auntie Sarah's blaming everyone. Grandma left. Ezra's upstairs crying. Please just tell me you're okay. We don't know what to do. His voice was lower. Gutted. Real. I didn't delete that one. But I deleted the rest. Each swipe felt like sweeping broken glass off a floor. Dangerous but necessary. One by one, I cleared them out. I didn't need to hear Brent unravel or Sarah claw at the walls or Della dress up betrayal in maternal concern. I didn't need their versions of me echoing in my ears anymore. By the time I was done, the voicemail box was empty. So was the house. I walked through the quiet condo, the air still, my footsteps soft against the hardwood. I opened the balcony door and let the breeze in. The world looked exactly the same from up here, people going to work, kids walking to school, buses rumbling past like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. And the people I left behind were learning that lesson in real time. I didn't reply. I didn't send a text. I didn't call. I didn't have to. Because now they knew, when I disappeared, I didn't just walk away. I took the center of gravity with me. The house looked smaller when I returned. Not in size, square footage doesn't shrink overnight, but in presence. Its once imposing facade, the one that loomed large in every memory of mine, now sat quietly on the cul-de-sac like a shell of what it once was. The blinds were half-drawn. The lawn, just slightly overgrown. There were fingerprints on the front door's glass, smudges of panic, of pacing, of people trying to claw back control. I didn't approach alone. Behind me walked Eliza, her black heels clicking against the pavement like punctuation marks, briefcase in hand, face unreadable. And trailing us, just a few steps back, the sheriff. He was courteous, but his presence was unmistakably official. He wore the badge like a wall, and I needed that wall today, not for protection, but for clarity. I hadn't returned to reconcile. I was here to deliver the reckoning. Eliza rang the bell. Once, firm and brief. Footsteps on the other side. Muffled voices. Then the door cracked open, and there was Brent. His face was hollow. He hadn't shaved. His shirt hung wrinkled on his frame, and the look in his eyes wasn't anger anymore, it was dread. Behind him, I caught a flash of chaos, papers strewn across the counter, laundry on the floor, someone crying upstairs. Sarah's voice was floating down the hallway, sharp and shrill. "Mira," Brent said flatly, like the word was made of sand. "What are you doing here?" I stepped forward. "I'm not here to talk, Brent." Eliza handed him the envelope. "This is a formal petition for full custody of Logan and Ezra," she said, crisp and clear. "It also includes orders for asset seizure related to joint properties and Callaway Enterprises." He took the envelope, but his hands didn't move to open it. "This is insane," he whispered. "No," I said. "What you did was insane. This is justice." Sarah appeared in the hallway, barefoot, mascara smudged. She froze when she saw me, like I was some specter come back to haunt her. "What is this?" she spat. "You bring a lawyer to our house." "It's not your house," I cut in, cool and absolute. "It never was." Eliza stepped past me and addressed her directly. "Ms. Callahan, you've been named in the legal suit as a co-conspirator in financial fraud and marital misconduct, as defined by the postnuptial agreement signed by Mr. Callaway. You're advised to retain separate counsel immediately." Sarah scoffed. "You've lost it." "This is what?" "A tantrum because your husband doesn't want you." Behind her, Della emerged from the kitchen, holding a mug like she thought it would shield her from what was coming. She took one look at the sheriff and paled. "I've got something for you, too," I said, pulling another envelope from my coat pocket and walking it over to her. Della accepted it with stiff fingers. "That's a cease and desist for slander and unauthorized financial interference in the Callaway Trust. You'll also find notification of your removal as beneficiary from all accounts and estate funds." She blinked. "You can't do that." "I already have." The silence that followed was thick. Sarah sank onto the bottom step of the staircase like the weight of it was finally setting in. Brent flipped open the folder Eliza had given him, his eyes scanning the pages, his face turning grayer with each line. Della leaned against the counter as though the envelope had knocked the wind out of her. And then, from the top of the stairs, came two voices. "Mom?" "Ezra." Logan followed him into view, both boys half-dressed and uncertain, eyes flicking between the adults in the room like they were watching something shatter in real time. Neither of them moved. Neither of them smiled. I stepped forward, but I didn't rush. "I'm not here to make you choose," I said, my voice softening as I looked at them. "But I want you to know the truth. I've never left you. Not for 1 second. I just stopped standing in a place where I wasn't respected." Logan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Ezra looked down at the floor. "You chose her," I said, gesturing gently toward Sarah, who sat frozen, arms wrapped tightly around her knees. "You chose to believe someone who wanted what I had. And now you live with her." Their faces told me everything. Confusion. Guilt. The early cracks of realization breaking open. I wanted to hold them, to remind them that their mother was still here. But not today. Not like this. Brent stepped forward, a desperate energy blooming across his face. "Please, Mira. We made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can find a way to." "No," I said, cutting him off. "You had your chance. You watched them break me. You stood there, silent, and let them strip me of everything I built. You let her wear my robe, sit in my place, mother my children. You said nothing." His eyes filled, but I didn't care. Tears didn't unburn bridges. They didn't erase betrayal. Sarah began to cry then, head buried in her hands. Eliza gestured toward the sheriff, who stepped forward and handed Brent the formal notice of removal from the Calloway residence. He was no longer authorized to remain on site during the division of assets unless supervised. It was now a matter of law. "You'll hear from the court soon," Eliza said coolly. Brent looked like he wanted to scream. But he didn't. He just stood there, broken, holding the pieces of a life he never realized was glued together by me. I turned back to Logan and Ezra. "I'll be in touch," I told them. "You can reach me when you're ready. Not when someone else tells you to." Logan took a step down. His mouth moved, but again, no words. Ezra's lip trembled. "Are we in trouble?" That broke something small in me. "No, sweetheart," I said gently. "You're just waking up." Then I turned, walked down the front steps with Eliza beside me, the sheriff a silent shadow behind. The sun was brighter now. The house sat behind me like a tomb, full of ghosts and echoes and the lies they told themselves to feel powerful. But I wasn't theirs anymore. I wasn't a prop in their delusion. I had returned not to reclaim what was mine, but to end what never should have begun. The legal system didn't move fast, but it moved exactly the way I needed it to, with precision, documentation, and an unwavering eye for detail. And when a woman like me came prepared, with timestamps, ledgers, footage, and a lawyer who made grown men stutter, well, the process began to feel less like justice and more like surgical removal. Eliza didn't just push paperwork. She dismantled legacies. Brent didn't stand a chance. Within 2 weeks of the formal filings, Calloway Enterprises was under full audit. The financial abuse was evident in every spreadsheet he'd ignored. Lavish personal expenditures logged as client entertainment, thousands funneled to Sarah's account disguised as marketing consultation, a vehicle purchased under the company name that, as the photos I submitted proved, Sarah used for brunch and Pilates. Eliza had built the case like an architect drawing plans for collapse. The business license was suspended pending investigation. Brent's face fell off the local business board's website. His email signatures still claimed CO, but legally, he was no longer authorized to access the company's accounts. He tried to go to the office once, the same day we had the building's locks changed. Security had his name on a new list now, no admittance. He stood outside the glass doors for 20 minutes, Eliza said, watching through the surveillance feed we obtained. Holding his phone. Dialing no one. Just standing there, in the reflection of a life he no longer owned. Sarah didn't fare much better. Once word got out that she'd been living in a home funded by fraudulent access to family assets, and worse, sleeping with the man whose wife still controlled every cent, she became social poison. Friends stopped returning her texts. Brands that had once begged her to collab deleted her from press kits overnight. She posted a filtered selfie with a quote about rising from ashes, but the comments beneath it bled with things like homewrecker, fraud, and karma. She deleted the post within hours. But screenshots never die. Then there was Della. I didn't relish cutting her off. But I didn't flinch either. The trust she'd always claimed to manage, the one she reminded me she helped structure, had never truly belonged to her. It had my name on every controlling document. When Eliza filed for her removal, she submitted 5 years' worth of manipulation, backdoor donations to shady nonprofits she favored, unauthorized loans to friends in need, and the crowning sin, trying to reallocate educational funds meant for my sons toward a new investment of her own. The trust administrators were swift. Her access was revoked. Her name erased. The day it happened, she left a voicemail that said only, "I see who you've become." I didn't respond. I wasn't interested in who she thought I was. I was done performing daughterhood for a woman who only loved power. Meanwhile, Logan and Ezra were changing. At first, the shift came in small moments. A single-word text from Logan, "Okay." A week later, "Can we talk?" Then Ezra sent me a photo of the dog we used to have, long gone now, with the message, "I miss her." And you. I didn't let myself cry. I just responded slowly, carefully. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because I needed them to know my love wasn't gone. But access to it now required effort. Truth. Accountability. I agreed to short visits, mediated by our family counselor. Logan didn't speak much at first. He stared at the floor, arms crossed, like if he made eye contact, he might drown in his own guilt. But Ezra talked, and I listened. She said you were always busy. He muttered one session, that she was the one who knew what we needed. I nodded. Maybe I was busy. But I was building a world where you'd always be protected. I didn't know I'd have to protect you from them. Ezra's eyes watered, but he didn't cry. He just nodded. They came to stay with me the next weekend. It was quiet, a little awkward, but real. No stage smiles. No false cheer. Just the three of us in the condo, ordering takeout and watching movies, sometimes in silence, sometimes in laughter. Logan apologized 2 days in. Quietly. No grand speech. Just, I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't get it. But I think I do now. I didn't rush to forgive him. But I hugged him. We were rebuilding. Not pretending nothing happened. Not sweeping it under the rug. We were constructing something new, brick by brick. With boundaries this time. I moved into a new home a month later. Nothing extravagant. Just clean, light-filled, nestled on a tree-lined street where no one knew my name. The deed was mine alone. No co-signers. No hidden contingencies. It was the first place I'd ever lived that felt like it belonged to me in every sense. The boys had rooms there. Not because I expected them to live with me full-time yet, but because I believed in making space for healing. Ezra painted his walls blue. Logan picked a darker charcoal and joked that it made him feel like a grown-up. I let them. They needed ownership of something again. They needed to see what a home looked like when it wasn't wrapped in deceit. One night, after they were asleep, I sat on the porch and listened to the wind rustle the trees. Brent had sent another letter that week. Handwritten. 4 pages. Apologies. Memories. Regrets. I didn't open it. I placed it in the drawer with the others, still sealed. His words didn't matter anymore. Not when his actions had already spoken with such devastating clarity. Sarah had gone quiet. No posts. No calls. A mutual friend said she was thinking of leaving town. I didn't care. Let her reinvent herself somewhere new. I wouldn't follow. I wouldn't warn. I wouldn't forgive. Della texted once. A simple question, can we talk? I blocked the number. I didn't owe her a seat at the table she tried to set on fire. My sons were here now, inching back into my life, not perfectly, but honestly. The house didn't echo anymore. It had sound again, feet on hardwood, spoons in cereal bowls, soft guitar strumming from Logan's room at night. I had no desire for revenge anymore. They thought the house, the money, the name, the family, all of it, belonged to them. But what they never understood was this. Everything they touched had been mine from the beginning. They were just renters. And I had come to collect the keys. The world got quieter and smaller in the months that followed, but not in a way that made me feel alone. Not in the way it used to. The kind of smallness I lived in now was deliberate. Like pruning a wild, tangled garden back to its roots. Every person left in my life was someone I had chosen. Every breath I took no longer felt monitored or withheld. I didn't wake up wondering what would go wrong, or who I had to prepare myself for. I woke up in a house I owned. I brewed coffee in silence, not because I was alone, but because peace had a sound, and I'd forgotten what it felt like until now. The boys came around, slowly, in the way people do when they realize they've been led through a maze by someone who had everything to gain from their confusion. Logan was the first to call regularly. Not because he had to. Because he wanted to. It started with casual questions, what brand of toothpaste do you buy again, and turned into longer conversations. Jokes. Stories. Apologies that lived in his tone more than his words. Ezra visited more often. He'd crash on the couch on weekends, then quietly move his stuff into the guest room without ever saying the words. One night, I found his favorite hoodie in the laundry, the one with the fraying sleeves he wore like armor. I folded it carefully and left it on his bed. He saw it the next morning and said, "Thanks, Mom," like it was the most natural thing in the world. It wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about returning. Not to what we had, but to what we could be. I let them earn my trust back, brick by quiet brick. I didn't throw it at them like a desperate offering. I made them sit with the space they'd helped create, the hole they'd left, and I let them decide whether they had the courage to fill it honestly. They did. Bit by bit. Sarah left town in early autumn. Someone told me she moved to a quieter city, smaller, more obscure. She took a job as a wellness coordinator at a boutique retreat center. The kind of place where people find themselves while avoiding who they used to be. I didn't check the website. I didn't care what she was calling herself now. She stopped posting online. Disappeared from the feeds like a glitch. As if removing the evidence meant erasing the choices. It didn't. Brent still tried. Letters every few weeks. All handwritten. 4, 5, sometimes 6 pages long. He wrote like he was still the man I married, like sincerity could bridge the canyon between what we once were and what he'd become. I never opened them. I stored them in a box at the back of my closet, beneath my old college yearbooks and a pair of heels I never wear. Not out of bitterness. Out of finality. He'd already spoken loudest when he chose silence while they unraveled me. Della called once. The number showed up unfamiliar, but I knew it was her before I answered. Her voice was exactly the same, careful, coaxing, full of that distant maternal concern that always felt more like surveillance than love. I just wanted to hear your voice, she said. I didn't reply. I've had time to think, she added, and I realized maybe I didn't handle everything the way I should have. Still, I said nothing. Mira, she asked when the silence stretched too long. I hung up. I blocked the number. That chapter didn't need a postscript. It needed closure. And I'd already written the final line. The mirror I kept in the hallway was a new one. Oval, simple brass frame. I passed it every day on my way out the door, and it always caught me off guard. Not because I didn't recognize myself anymore, but because I finally did. There she was. Not the woman Brent shrugged away, not the mother Della said was too cold, not the friend Sarah outgrew and tried to become. She wasn't perfect or polished, but she was whole. Her eyes steady. Her mouth a little softer at the corners now. She didn't flinch when she saw herself. She looked like someone you couldn't erase. People whispered things, of course. They always do when a woman refuses to fold politely. They said I overreacted, that I ruined the family, that I should have fought for my marriage instead of dismantling it. But those people never asked what it was like to be replaced in your own home, to be exiled from your children's affection, to sit silently as your mother co-signed your erasure with a nod. I wasn't the villain. I was just the only one who stopped pretending. And somehow, that made me dangerous. But in this new life, this quieter, tighter world, I wasn't dangerous. I was safe. For myself. For my sons. For the future I was now building on my own terms. I found work again, not because I needed the money, but because I missed the rhythm of it. I took on consulting clients, wrote articles, helped other women restructure their businesses, their lives, their boundaries. My story spread without me ever needing to tell it directly. Word got around. Women found me. They always do. There was one evening, close to winter, when I sat with Logan and Ezra by the fireplace. Ezra leaned his head on my shoulder. Logan was showing me some stupid meme on his phone, the kind of humor I would never understand, but laughed at anyway just to see him smile. And in that moment, I realized something. They hadn't lost me. They'd just wandered off into a story someone else wrote, and now they were finding their way back. Back to me. Back to the truth. And I wasn't waiting with bitterness or punishment. I was waiting with clarity. They thought they could rewrite me. That they could reduce me to the bitter woman, the absentee mother, the cold matriarch who just didn't know how to be soft. They spread those chapters among themselves like gospel, justifying their cruelty in the name of comfort. But I wrote the ending. And it wasn't tragic. It was free. It was earned. It was mine. I was never the villain. I was the architect of my own resurrection. And that woman in the mirror? She'll never be erased again.